We all want to be heard. We all want to be seen. We all want to be valued as a part of the team. And when we're working together, we do it much better. Here's to the dream. Education is liberation, but application's the key. It's called social emotional learning. Tables is turning, we getting free. Bringing our whole selves to the journey. Healing the herd, who bigger than we. Self-aware and prepared. Only good vibrations.
Vibrations in the air. All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy Black History Month. Happy Black History 365. My name is Jamila Sams. I am the founder of We Do It for the Culture. And before we get started, please drop in the chat. Where are you hailing from? Let's get some shout outs before we get started. Let's light up the chat. All right, we got Brooklyn to ATL, Chi-Town. Oh, Ontario, Canada, nice. Big ups to Charlotte. All right, Westchester, New York, the DMV. That's where I am. I'm in Baltimore. All right. People say we can't say that we're part of the DMV, but we are. Hudson Valley, New York, Dallas. All right. Hey, Linnell from the Boogie Down Bronx. All right. All right. Welcome again. For those that's joining us, again, my name is Jamila Sams. I'm the founder of We Do It for the Culture, which is the only culturally responsive social emotional learning curriculum rooted in hip hop culture, current events, and storytelling for grades 6 through 12. And I am happy to be in community with you all this evening. So we are going to be talking about social emotional learning. It has always been here, centering Black history, culture, and community. Now, let me say this from the beginning. We are not here to introduce something new. We are here to remember, because what we now call social emotional learning did not start with a framework, a checklist, or a curriculum guide. It started with the people, with community, with culture, with survival, with joy. Social emotional learning is simply language that we're using today to describe the practices that our ancestors have always known: how to regulate ourselves, care for one another, build belonging, and move through the world with purpose and dignity. Before SEL became a buzzword, it was already being practiced. You can see it in ancient Kemet through the 42 laws of Ma'at. Those are principles that are grounded in truth, balance, justice, and harmony. You can see it in African and indigenous ways of being that center collective responsibility, emotional awareness, sacred connection, and making sure that we are grounded in the land and community. Our ancestors did not call it SEL. They called it living in alignment. It showed up in communities. It raised children. It talked about how knowledge was shared through oral tradition, how identity, belonging, and purpose were nurtured long before Western schooling even existed. So tonight, we are recognizing that culture has always been the foundation. We also want to hold space for truth, because social emotional learning not only lives in our wisdom, but in our resilience. So during the transatlantic slave trade, during some of the most unimaginable attempts to strip our humanity, social emotional learning practices also became survival strategies. Relationship skills meant caring for one another when systems refused to see our humanity. Self-management meant finding grounding in song, spirituality, and collective strength. Responsible decision-making meant imagining futures that did not exist and building towards them anyway. That same emotional intelligence runs through us every single day. It's the discipline and the collective action that power the civil rights movement. It's the community care and protection embedded in grassroots organizations like the Black Panthers. And yes, it is the joy, innovation, and self-expression that fueled hip-hop culture, where identity, voice, and belonging became an art form for healing and transformation. So when we talk about social emotional learning today, we're not talking about soft skills. We're not talking about character development. We're not talking about PBIS expectations. We're talking about social emotional liberation from our past in order to create a better future. So tonight is about reclaiming what has always been ours and understanding how we bring that wisdom into our classrooms, into leadership, and our daily practice. So, again, welcome and let's get started. So, I am so excited. This is like a family reunion for me tonight. I've been hibernating. It's been cold here in Baltimore, so I haven't been able to get out and see my folks like I want to, but I am happy to be in this virtual space with them tonight. And I'm going to introduce our panel at this time. First up, we have Kristen Hopkins Vincent. All right, give it up, give it up. Kristen is the founder and chief resilience officer for Black SEL, a national hub advancing culturally affirming social emotional learning, a fierce visionary and award-winning leader. She is an author, international speaker, and social entrepreneur whose work has impacted communities across the US and globally. I am so happy to have you here tonight, Kristen. All right, next
Thank
up,
you.
thanks for joining us. Next up, we have David Spellman. All right, there we are. What's up, David? He is a hip hop educator based in Charlotte, North Carolina. He specializes in using hip hop pedagogy, SEL, and culturally responsive practices to meet students where they are and elevate both academic and behavioral outcomes. He is also the author of Just Like Music, Social Emotional Learning Inspired by Hip Hop. Welcome, David.
Appreciate it.
And last but not least, we have Eva Jean-Charles, who is the CEO and co-founder of Black on Black Education and a sixth grade history teacher in the Bronx, an educator and advocate. She supports schools in balancing rigor and joy while empowering students through leadership, social justice, and action-driven learning. What's up, Eva?
Hey, y'all.
All right. And now at this time, I'm going to hand the mic to our MC, our master of curriculum, Kareem McQuilkin. What's up,
Thank
Kareem?
you. What's up, Jamila? Thank you. And I like the way you sang that melody, just like music. You, you might have some bars slash R&B's
Something.
going over there. I see
I got
roots,
a
a
couple
little
talents, you know.
roots.
I keep them low key.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, like Jamila stated, SEL's been here, right? It's not an initiative, right? It's something that we live as Black people. So we're going to get into our panelists and we're going to ask them a few questions. And audience, I want y'all to make sure you get your questions ready because we are going to open up the floor for you all to ask some questions later on during our time together. So, here's a question that I'm just gonna pose to everyone, and we'll start with you, Kristen. I'd love to hear your response to this question. What cultural practice or community experience taught you SEL before you even knew what it was?
What cultural practice? I believe, I grew up in church. I was a church girl. I led praise and worship at the age of 7 years old. And so I have always been grounded in my faith. And I believe that was my first real experience of social emotional learning was Sunday school, getting up and having to read scriptures and having to be affirmed in who I was. Also, my mom was really, really big on affirmations, so teachers told me I was very talkative as a child. I was very curious, but those things were labeled as bad, back then. And so my mom really would come home. I would come home and say, the teacher told me this, and my mom would tell me the opposite. She'd be like, "Oh, you talkative? That means you're a public speaker." You know what I'm saying? And then look, here you go. Years later, I became a public speaker. But those were the little affirmations that were able to enhance my self awareness at a very young age for me to understand not only who I was, whose I was, and then also for me to really just be grounded and rooted in what I believe in and just my identity at that. So we were a real big household on whose we were and whose we were, meaning that's a lot of kingdom talk over here that I'm
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah.
but we were grounded in that and rooted in that. And I think that that's where SEL began for me.
Well, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, right? Like not whose you are, right? That's such a it's spiritual, right? It's a God-given gift to feel and experience joy. At SEL, that's what I heard when I was listening to you. And it's a quick story for the audience, right? When I first started working at We Do It for the Culture, this was 2022. Jamila hurt her foot and was like, "Yo, I need you to go to North Carolina." She didn't even know me that well. We were probably working together for a month. And she
Yeah.
said, "Look, I need you to go. It's Black SEL." I said, "Black SEL? Like what? Like how I never heard of this? Like what?" And I believe it was the first ever Black SEL conference. And that was my entry point into doing this work as I left New York City. So the bar is like Kristen set the bar so high for my experience. Outside of New York City and Black SEL. I know people from all around the world is a part of that. So shout out to you. I know you're going to
Thank
share a
you.
lot more about that later during our discussion. So yeah, shout
Yeah.
out to you, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to come to you next, David. What cultural practice or community experience taught you SEL before you even knew what it was?
Definitely got to piggyback on what Kristen said. But I remember, going up there having to say the Bible scriptures, and I'm a jokester, so I'm sure somebody may know on this call, but the shortest Bible verse, Jesus wept. I would say that countless times when they had me go up there and speak. But then another piece about just growing up in the church for me was that intergenerational learning, being able to talk to the elders, like not even just your own, aunties or uncles or grandparents, but you had the community elders also pouring into you. And I think that was definitely big for my like shaping and becoming who I am. But then also for me, my story's a little bit unique. I was born in the UK and then I lived all over the country, United States, and then a few places outside of the continental USA. So I think that social awareness piece, learning how to connect with different cultures, learning how to like embrace it, not okay, we don't start with the same language, but we find those places where we connect and we can build that relationship. So that's that relationship skills in SEL and that social awareness. So those experiences for sure
Yeah.
gave me a framework. Well, we're saying loosely framework before the terms came to be.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, David. And right, you global, right? Like this is a global movement of SEL, right? And I love how you shared the way that you bring that international experience that you have into all of the work that you do. So yeah, shout out to David. Actually got to see. I've been following Dave. You know those people you follow alive for a long time. That you finally meet them in person, man. And it was a great experience when we ran into you at BMEC in Philly, man. And we caught the end of your presentation. And yeah, Sha, I can't wait for you to share more about your work with the audience. And we're gonna come to Eva next, Black on Black Ed. So
Hey,
Eva, hey, what cultural practice or community experience taught you SEL before you even knew what it was?
one thing about me, I'm a laugh.
Yeah.
Things are hard, I'm a laugh. Things are good, I'm a laugh. Things are okay, I'm a laugh. Because that is where, like, that is joy, that is creating joy, that is spreading joy just by a sound that's coming out of your body, just by the pushing and slapping each other and running apart and coming back together because something was so funny. The laugh that is so, you're so into it that you can't get actual sound out. And how many how how often we go so long without those deep gut belly laughs, and then how quickly you come back to yourself and your body after you have one. And so when kids in my classroom are pissing me off, I'm a laugh. When an administrator is getting on my last nerve, I'm a laugh. And I don't and I know that that stems from being the oldest sibling of four and us going through it growing up and just figuring out a way, whether it was the VHS tape that we watched for 757 times. We laughed and we knew what was going to happen and we still laughed. And I think that laughter, that commitment to laughter, the commitment back to joy was always social and emotional learning. It was regulation. It was taking the breath before you moved on. Because as hard as things got, I could always laugh. I can always find a reason to find joy and laugh. And so I think that that's the one for me.
Oh man, yeah, shot right. And we always love those teachers who like to laugh, right, and joke, and actually could build relationships with us, right? So I wish I could go back to the sixth grade and be in your class. I had some cool sixth grade teachers, but not as cool as you. And you know when you said about laughter, one of the best icebreakers I ever did, but it actually required the most reflection time before we could actually share out was when was the last time you literally laughed out loud? Like, we texted, we might chuckle a little bit, like, it was funny, but like literally laughed out loud. And then it brought a lot of joy. It takes time, though. If you want to do that activity, people might need a little bit extra time to really think, like, okay, when was the last time I literally had one of those deep belly laughs? But, once we started sharing, everybody started laughing again. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that, Eva. So we're gonna come back around to you, Kristen, and this section of the webinar is gonna be about our origin stories, right? So, Kristen, who is Kristen Vincent? Who Kristen Hopkins Vincent, and why was Black SEL created?
Yeah, I am a follower of Christ first. I'm a Black woman, I'm a wife, I'm a new mom, and I'm a pioneer, and I am an architect of social emotional liberation ecosystems. I believe in building, I believe in designing, I believe in sustaining the work. And so that's who I am. A little bit about me is I started in this work, creating social emotional resources for alternative and juvenile justice specifically. And I remember in 2016, a lot of people was like, "Sis, you ain't gonna make it in this work because it was hard. It was transient populations. It was kids in and out. But I was really, really passionate about being a solutionist and bringing solutions to the work, and also making it culturally responsive and culturally affirming. And so through the years of being in this field, I consistently saw some gaps. And some of the gaps was in the literature around naming Blackness and what we spoke about. But then the other parts of the gap was, as a provider, it was really hard for me to constantly get contracts in urban districts where I knew my children were, the children I was serving, and I would see a lot of folks going into these districts and would be presenting pretty data, but the data did not match the skin color of our children. And so that was an issue for me. And so from a provider side, I created Black SEL to be able to allow educators and providers to have language and speak to it. But from a youth side, one of the things I saw was Black students didn't just need social emotional tools, they needed intentional affirmations, protection, and language for what they were already surviving. So this work really exists to move us from coping to this liberatory practice. So this is why, in a nutshell, why I created Black SEL. And when we talk about liberation, I just want to really frame that liberation is not abstract. And so when we think about Black SEL, it emerges from us as one could be our reclaimed identity, rooted in this confidence in the cultural memory, and it can also emerge from a empowered voice that's grounded in our critical consciousness. And we'll talk a little bit about the framework, and just really focusing on this resilient emotional life. What does this look like for Black people? And just a deep sense of what we call social responsibility over here and collective responsibility, not just thinking about ourselves, but our people, and how do we advance this work and sustain it for our people. So being able to create this work really allowed me to name the Blackness in social emotional learning, to name our identities, our cultural realities, our material conditions, all of the work that we've laid, our ancestors have laid before us. We have to consistently see that in our social emotional learning and liberation.
Mm, yes, shout out to you for creating that. Every time I tell somebody about Black, I'm like, yo, Black SEL, you gotta send them the website, or I'm talking to them in person, their eyes just light up like words. So yeah, I can't wait for you to share more about the framework later in the discussion. David, we're gonna come around to you now, my brother. Who is David Spellman, and what work are you leading at the Positive Archer?
Well, definitely, I'm a child of the Most High. I am the son of David and Janet. I like to say, I'm hip hop. That's definitely who I am. I'm definitely hip hop. I'm inquisitive and I'm a connector. And then the last thing I'll say is I'm an optimist, man. Like growing how we grow up, like some of the experiences we had to go through, you always had to see on that other side and say, you know what, we can still push through, we can still make it. Big up Jada Kiss, we gonna make it. But as far as the work that I do with Positive Archer, man, everything I do is with a hip hop lens. And with hip hop being so ingrained in my life from zero to now almost 40, I knew there was positive ways hip hop influenced us. Of course, hip hop is stigmatized all day long. But me being a K-12 educator, me being a community mental health individual, I knew I could take hip hop and kind of flip it. Not even saying it needed to be flipped, but show people how it can bring light to you, how it can boost you up. And these, like you said, these social skills, not soft skills, but these vital skills, these human experience skills. Hip hop has that. So with the work that I do with Positive Archer Solutions, I really just destigmatize hip hop for educational consumption. And I'm saying educational consumption, but for anybody who appreciates hip hop, for anybody who loves hip hop culture, let me just show you ways how it can add value, beyond just, listening to it on your headphones.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out to you. And I know you down in North Carolina. Kristen's down in North Carolina. After hearing both of y'all, I'm just hearing Petey Pablo in my mind. The North Carolina, right? Real quick before we transition to Black on Black Ed and Eva, how would you rate the J. Cole album just by numbers on a scale of 1 to 10? Another North Carolina native, and we could talk more about it later. But what number would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I got to give it an 8, man. So if you haven't tapped in with the album, Common, one of my top. I used to
Yeah.
love her again. Number one track on the project for me.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. We're gonna have to continue that conversation. Eva, we are coming to you next. So, who is Eva Lorene Jean Charles, and what work are you leading at Black on Black Ed?
Oof, I am so many things. I'm the oldest sibling of four. I am from Rockland County, which most people don't know where that is. I am a revolutionary educator. I am committed to balancing rigor and joy in my classroom and supporting educators in balancing rigor and joy in their classrooms. What I found when I got into teaching, which I did completely by accident, um, was that there was either the teacher that loved the babies hard, um, but gave them work that a fourth grader could do, or the teachers that gave students rigorous work and held them to high expectations, but didn't care about them. And so, what I knew was true was that the reason why the kid that's throwing chairs in your classroom isn't throwing them in mine is because I genuinely and like truly care and loved on them babies. And so, coming to this identity of a revolutionary educator came from the standpoint of knowing that I got into education to be the teacher that I did not have, that could understand the lived experience of the young people that I serve, and up to the point that I do, and then trust them enough to elevate their voices and center their voices in my classroom so that whatever I didn't understand, whatever cultural experience was different from mine, they could fill the gaps for me, and having them be and become co-creators of learning in my classroom. And so I have stumbled and tripped and fell and done all the things wrong, um, because I'm a human. But the reality that I have chosen to get back up again over and over and over and over again shows my students that they can do the exact same thing. And by modeling resilience, by being honest and apologetic when I show up as less than who I know I need to be in the classroom, there's parts of my little self that heal because of that choice. And I'm abundantly grateful to step into my sixth grade classroom every day.
Nice, nice. And please tell us a little bit about Black on Black Ed. Like I know you working with people all over the world, so let the audience know about Black on Black Ed and some of the work y'all.
Absolutely. Black on Black education came out of a real understanding that there is a long lasting tradition in Black communities to take what we know and pass it on to the next generation. And so I wanted to know what that would look like in schools and classrooms. And I wanted to live into that tradition. So what I know to be real is when you love on children, they love you back. What I know to be real is when you hold students to a high expectation with love, with care, and with support the entire way through, that they rise to that expectation. And so now that I have figured it out for the most part in my classroom, I support, coach, lead workshops, professional development, and create content that supports educators in doing the exact same thing. Because when you have thousands and thousands of revolutionary educators out there, yeah, all the powers that be, they get scared, and that's why they're trying to stop us from talking about real history, and that's why they're trying to stop us from being able to have real conversations with with students. Like it's scary, but that scary I use and turn that energy into creating the reality, because we have been here before, over and over and over again, and we will be in the place where they love us again, and then we'll be in the place where they hate us again, and so on and so on and so on. So arm yourself with the tools to navigate the ebbs and flows of racism, classism, so and all the other isms. I don't need to go through the list.
Yeah,
Y'all know.
yeah. I hear you. Yup. Tools and receipts. Tools and receipts. We know who is for us and who's against us. So yeah, we're gonna come. Thank you for that, Eva. And we're gonna come back to you, Kristen. So we know that Castle developed the 5 SEL competencies and transformative social emotional learning. But what made you develop the Black SEL framework, and how does it differ from the 5 SEL competencies and transformative social emotional learning?
Yeah, for so real quick, I wrote a white paper on this work specifically, which I'm going to drop a link to make sure that everybody is able to read it. We wrote it with Dr. Rob Jagers as well around transformative SEL and the comparison. But for time's sake, I'm going to give you a little bit of a snippet and breakdown. So when we think, well, let me first say in 2023, we were really blessed to get funding to do research for the entire year. And so it was really important for me to not only talk about Black SEL, but understand the why of why we're doing it, and then lift the data up around what it says, but then also the literature, the gaps in literature. And so we were able to assess the landscape of over 300 articles. Only 6% spoke around the cultural affirming and culturally relevant, specifically towards Black children and families. And that was an issue for us. And so creating the Black SEL framework was a deep need that I saw for years, but more so began seeing and making it more personal as we went along this Black SEL journey. And so when you think of traditional SEL, it teaches us how to manage our emotions. And Black SEL asks why those emotions even exist in the first place. So our framework is rooted in context, is rooted in identity, it's rooted in power. A lot of people don't like to say power, but I believe Black people, we need power if we want to change systems. And so our framework really centers this Black identity with Black self-concept. It talks about our lived experiences and systems, not just behavior. And we really don't separate SEL from racism, from power, and from history. We name them because you really can't just regulate your way out of oppression. Right. And so like a real example of that in real time and currently right now is my students are talking about the ways that our current president has displayed our former president as apes, right? And they're constantly seeing these narratives being pushed, and it's ways that we can't just regulate ourselves from oppressive things that we constantly see. And so when we name them, and when our kids use this critical conscious lens as they not only are curious, not only making responsible decisions, it allows them to say, let me make this decision, but let me be curious about what this is. And when Rob at Transformative SEL talked about this curiosity, we believe in that deeply, but then we extended it to really talk about this critical consciousness and what is our social responsibility around responsible decision making for our communities. And so just the 6 pillars I'll name to you really quickly. It's Black self-concept, is live civics, is inclusion of community stakeholders, critical consciousness and social responsibility, and civic engagement. And then we have 3 elements that go under and live around our whole framework, which is power, action, and sustainability. We do everything to build power. We can't do that without our action, and we cannot make it last without making it sustainable. So everything we do, from our SEL summer institutes to our summit, to our advocate program, to our civic engagement and our voter education work, all of that work is literally a pipeline. So you can see it on our website as a cycle that we do, and that is how we sustain the work. So hopefully, I was able to share that in a nutshell and not take too long.
No, no, not at all. And we're gonna share resources with everybody after the session. So be on the lookout for that, everybody in the audience. And later on, feel free to drop that in the chat as well, Kristen. Because it's important for us to name, right? Name blackness, right? Name white supremacist structures. Like we have to name it in order to fight it. So thank you for just bringing all of this revolutionary work to life. Thank you. David, so we know that you are an author, right, as well. What inspired you to write just like music, social emotional learning inspired by hip hop?
All right, I'm gonna get to that, but let me big up my sisters first and foremost. You cannot regulate yourself out of oppression.
Yeah,
Come on now.
yeah,
Then what Eva said, co-creators of their learning. Come on, nah, I
yeah,
always got to give it up. So
yeah.
like big up my
Bars.
sisters. Yeah, no, for
We say
real.
bars. We got to get a button for that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, with
Fix-
the the air horn, man, for my
yeah,
Caribbean people.
right.
But getting back to the questions, I think for most, definitely most, every black person, maybe some brown people of a certain age, coming up as a youth, you heard this phrase. If you wanted to hide something from a black person, put it in a book. Education was paramount in my household. Both my parents were in the military. They didn't go to college. Didn't mean they weren't educated. So we had encyclopedias in the house. We was always reading. We was always doing something educational. So when I heard that phrase, through my upbringing, I'm like, that's so disrespectful to my culture. That's so disrespectful to my people. So, growing up, if somebody said you couldn't do something, the number one thing you're trying to do is to prove them wrong. So if you're saying my people are unintelligent. We can't read. We can't do this. I got you. When I get of age, I'm going to write a book. So that was where it kind of started. But going further, like I said, with the hip hop lens, hip hop has taught me so many things. Man, I'm on wax repeatedly talking about A Tribe Called Quest and the many lessons they taught me. And I'll just, share one quick example right now. Midnight Marauders. If you don't know what the word maraude means, go listen to that album because they explain it for you. That was the first time that hip hop taught me something. And like I've told many people, I've never been in the classroom where they taught the definition of marauders. Guess who taught me? A Tribe Called Quest did. So when just those experiences in so many different hip hop tracks, whether it be from the West Coast, Midwest, down south, up north, that's my bias, East Coast, spent some time in Philly. So, Beans, Cassidy, Young Gun, so many. Schoolie D, like just going back to the essence. But there was so many times that hip hop imprinted positivity on me. Hip hop taught me. And I see that Shauna, with the KRS line, you must learn. Like I really did learn so much through hip hop. So I knew it could help the younger generation. It can help, a lot of people. So that's why I really wrote the book because they said, hide it from black people. We're gonna put it in the book, but then let me show you the power of hip hop as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the first time I saw that phrase was my uncle had a book with a bunch of images from the Million Man March, and somebody had a T-shirt on in one of the images that said that, and that's the first time, and I never ever forgot that quote right there. So yeah, shout out to you, and just sometimes Jamila, she catch me slipping. We got a scale 1 to 5 with if you a certified hip hop head or not, and she catch me slipping with some tribe facts. You know what I'm saying? Like, because anything before 99, like you might catch me. Anything after 99, I feel like, all right, I got that. You could quiz me on that. But yeah, shout out to you. And I'm gonna say the book one more time. We'll share it with the audience after this in the follow-up email. But the book is Just Like Music, Social Emotional Learning, Inspired by Hip Hop by David Spellman. All right, Eva. So Black on Black Ed centers students driving and co-creating their experience and the future of education. Why is it critical that students are not just participants, but designers or co-creators of what comes next?
Because us not listening to them has not worked.
Mm.
Our young people, when you make something their idea, all of a sudden it's the coolest thing in the world. All of a sudden they want to be in and engaged. And the most liberatory thing that we could possibly do is not only have students want to be lifelong learners, but to have them not be lifelong learners because someone told them to be that, but because they decided it. Right. And that only happens when they are able to follow their interests, where they're able to engage deeply and richly in things that matter to them in school. When I'm having 25-minute conversations about Venezuela and 35-minute conversations about the history of the land that is Israel and Palestine, then when I'm having these conversations with students about the things that they are being inundated with, these messages, all the things that we're seeing, they're seeing. And I think that there was a period of time where adults could navigate the world and shelter what was happening in the world outside of their walls. That sheltering is gone. And so when we think about co-creating education with students, is not allowing them to walk through the world with questions. They would not having them walk through the world with confusion, not having them walk through the world out of alignment with an understanding of why this is happening. They just see all of these messages without being able to talk about them. And so when they see me when they ask me questions, I remember asking questions in high school, and well, we don't have time for that, or that's not what we're talking about right now. And now I'm supposed to go on Google and find which article is scholarly and which one is going to give me the right information. And I'm 12. So what would happen if we allowed students to shape what they learned, if we allowed students to shape the future of education, because they have so much more information than we give them credit for. They know so much more than we give them credit for. And every big challenge I've ever had in my classroom was solved by the students inside that room. Because if I lay down the law and I say this is what we're going to do, and I tell them that this is how this is going to happen, their contrarian nature, by nature of being an adolescent, is going to peek in. When the question is, how do we fix this? All of a sudden we have an issue that has been solved in 30 minutes or less. And so when educators come to me and they tell me, oh my goodness, like who has time for that? Who has time to redirect for half your classroom lesson? Who has time to beg students to do their work? Who has time to hound students down for the 17 zeros that you got in the grade book? I don't have that problem, because my students do their work in class because they're engaged, they're ready to learn, and it's because I have centered their voices in everything that we do in our classroom.
Mm. Yeah, censoring their voices. Yep. And that just that word, right? And I know David highlighted it as well, right? When you first said it, like co-creators, right? Co-creators in this learning. So shout out to all of that work that you're doing with your students, Eva, and censoring their voice. That's one of the it's the most important thing, but it seems like it's not a topic of discussion um, on a consistent basis. When especially in a lot of the schools that I've been in and supported, like it's almost like what we could do that. Like it's like where y'all been, right? So yeah, thank you for keeping that work alive and at the center of everything you do. Kristen, what moments or feedback have shown you without a doubt that the work that you are doing is meaningful and is having an impact?
Yeah, first I just want to say I am echoing a lot of what Eva said. I am so big on allowing our kids to be co-creators. One of the things that I always tell my team is we do not develop to just develop. We must develop to the need of our children's and families. And so that was so good, and that just resonated with me. I've seen so much impact. I mean, we just produced a huge data report, and it's on the site right now for 2025 with all of our programs. And one of the things that I'll tell you up close is that I seen I was a big part of is our youth participatory action research. Our children did. We had a funding to just focus on for 8 months. This Y Project, and we basically asked our children. We said, okay, what do y'all want to do? And this was our one of our bigger cohorts that had been with us for 3 years. So we called them the OG advocates. And so we're like, what do y'all want to do? And so they really came up with 10 topics. They argued them things down, and we just let them have their moments to be like, what's important, what's important. So they finally came up with community violence and social media, specifically around the Durham, North Carolina area. They were able to interview over 150 peers and over like 40 community leaders. From that, those kids were able to synthesize, they were able to probe questions, they were able to analyze data, they were able to literally create a whole research presentation and not only present it in Chicago, but they presented it on our national stage at Black SEL Summit. What we saw from there was that there was a big intersection between social emotional between social media and community violence and how it negatively impacted the social emotional well-being of Black people. So they were able to talk and speak to that. But that was something that I saw from there was our kids became organizers. And so my one of my children or one of my advocates came up to me and I was in a advocate session. They said, Miss Kristen, we want to start a Black SEL club. And we had trained them on like every month. We have this advocate program where it's every single month we train them. So I was like, cool, okay, what does that look like? They were like, oh, we already got a presentation for you. We won't present it to the principal like in 2 days. Can you review it? So I'm like, come on. Now, mind you, we're already teaching these kids how to organize, right? But it hit me something serious about a year and a half ago that I'm like, oh, wow, these kids are now organizers because they are now organizing and we're not even teaching them no more. So they showed me this full on presentation. I'm talking about it was the framework. It was our how we use this invisible backpack. It was our relationship stations. It was all the things that we taught these kids, right? They were literally telling us this is what we're going to do with the club. This is how we're going to recruit people. So the next 2 days they went, they talked to the principal. He came back to me. He was like, man, you got some kids that don't say no for it. Don't take no for an answer. So then long story short, they created a whole Black SEL mental health field day. It was 2,000 kids came from Hillside and was a part of it. Every station that we normally would have at our block parties, at our
Wait,
events,
Kristen,
they recreated
Chris-
these stations.
but you froze right there when you said 2000. Can you just tell
Yes.
us what? Because it sounded like it's going to be very important. So could you
Yes,
rewind real
sorry.
quick?
It was at Hillside High School where we have launched our now hub that I'll talk about in a second. In that high school, it's an all predominantly Black high school. And so the kids came together. They wanted to do a Black SEL mental health field day and do like emotional check-ins for all the students as they were doing testing. These
Yeah,
kids were able to put this together. It was phenomenal. Our team came and supported them. They literally put it together in a week, y'all. But it showed me how not just them, like our other advocates from other schools wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to replicate it at their schools. But this it shows me that the work is working when the children are becoming organizers for themselves.
yeah,
But yeah, I will definitely share the impact report in here just to share more about all of our programs. But those are two specific programs that really, really I see just incredible growth and prosperity, I would say, in those areas.
yeah. Is that what the news covered? Is that the story that the news covered at Hillside?
No, that
This
wasn't.
is
That was
this
a
is
whole
something
that was
else.
a whole another thing that
Yeah,
happened last year. So no, that was the news coverage was the Black SEL Hub that we
yeah.
just opened up in the school. That was a
Okay.
Black SEL mental health field day that happened last year. So yeah,
Last.
but it's on our page. It's like little reels and stuff like that. For y'all to see it.
Yeah, dope, dope. Yeah, we're gonna come back to that Black SEL hub because the audience need to know about that. So David, when you see students engage with your book or workbook, what changes do you notice in how they show up, communicate, or lead, and what role does hip hop play in motivating them?
Well, first and foremost, I'm gonna say it's not just the students. I do work a lot with students, but if you're working with students, guess who else you're working with? The families, the communities. So it's really all encompassing. And I really have two examples that I want to speak about right now. Last February, matter of fact, around this time last year, I was in San Francisco. So I was working with some students in San Francisco Unified School District and then in Oakland. And we did the Detroit chapter, which is all about gratitude. So I take a lyric by Big Sean that talks about, being gracious. And I frame it as, yes, when people do something good for you, you should express that gratitude. But then let's take it deeper. I feel like I'm in the church right now. Let's be spiritual. Every day that you wake up, you should be grateful because it didn't have to be that way. So we go through that whole, spill, and the activity is students creating a gratitude letter. So
Mm.
we were downtown San Francisco. I probably had 70 students with some of their family members, with some of the workers from that nonprofit. And when I say this young man read his gratitude letter to his mother, she was in tears because she said to me that some of the things that he remembered, he never verbalized that to me. And I'm like, this moment came because of hip hop. Let's marinate on that. A gratitude letter from this young man to his mother came from a hip hop track, the verse by Big Sean. So when I'm always just, challenging that notion that hip hop is so negative, hip hop is this and it's that, and I'm like, I get you. It's present. I do understand that, but you never look on the other side, like how it can boost you up, how it can fulfill you. So that was out in San Francisco. And then locally here, I actually worked with a mosque. Surprisingly, I would think, initially maybe they wouldn't see the value in the work, but they tapped in because of word of mouth. And in my New Orleans chapter, I use a lyric by Jay Electronica. So in Exhibit C, he said, "You either build or destroy." So we
Right.
went through that whole framework of just like, anytime you interact with somebody, you have the opportunity to build a good relationship or tear it down by what you say and how you treat them. I had this mother reaching back out to me and say, now when the young man is having an argument with his brother, he's now reciting that lyric. Are we building or destroying in this moment? Come on, man. Like you cannot tell me that this is not powerful work that we're doing through hip hop.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it with those two examples.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. Yeah, anytime tears, come up, man, you know that they really hit the soul, right? So yeah, yeah. Shout out to you for doing that work, and I love that you highlighted it's not just the students, right? It's the families, it's the community, it's the adults, right? Even the teachers, right? Gotta make sure we create these spaces where we can all coexist because yeah, it's a whole ecosystem of human beings, right, that play different roles in our community. So yeah, thank you for that. Eva, in spaces where students are truly leading, how do you see joy, trust, and emotional safety show up differently than in those traditional school settings? And if you could, maybe highlight a student and give them a shout out as you talk about that and respond to that question.
Young people are joyful by nature. They're curious by nature. They're community oriented by nature. And so when you allow them to be more in alignment with their true nature, then those things are going to be a part of the culture of the space that you're creating.
Yeah.
But the traditional education system doesn't do that. What Bettina Love says is they actually murder the spirits of young people and they create the cynical adult that nothing can change and nothing can happen, and this overarching narrative, this culture of apathy that exists within our society, and that each and every one of the, like, all of us speaking tonight, we're doing work to like circumvent and combat that within these systems that exist, which is so revolutionary and so powerful. And I think that what happens is that by creating the space and time and energy for young people to do that in your classroom, you slowly start to do that with yourself, right? Like in the beginning of teaching, I had all these narratives. I listened to y'all and had y'all on the podcast. I learned about SEL. I was figuring it all out. Like this is year 6 for me. And I knew all of the theory, but the practice was so separate because I was not joyful. I was not happy. I was not in a place where I could curate something that I didn't have. And so when I think about one of my students, my birthday was last week, and she sent me a 4-minute video. And she's like, I was running around all day, but don't you think that I forgot your birthday? It's in my calendar. Like I made sure I wanted to make, she was in the subway. She goes to my alma mater. She was picking between 2 different schools. And she was like, well, you went here. So I'm, you know what? I'm gonna go to John Jay. And she's walking out and I can see her walking to the Columbus Circle train station, and she's recording this video. And she's like, and I was so hard-headed and I didn't listen. And I'm in class and I'm hearing these things and nobody else in the room can answer the question, but I knew the answer because what I learned in this class. And that doesn't happen if they're not learning joyfully. That doesn't happen if they're not learning in a way that's connected to the other people in the room. That's not happening if they're so out of alignment with, like, if they're in survival mode, if they can't take a breath, if they're scared that every time they get a question wrong, you're going to shit on them. Like, that's the narrative that the traditional education system creates. And when you circumvent that, like, I make mistakes every day, and them kids be like, I didn't even, like, I'll apologize for something the next day and they'll be like, I didn't even notice, because it's already like it's one thing when your husband or your best friend tells you what you need to hear that you didn't want to hear in a way that you didn't want to hear it. That's real different than a random person on the internet clocking your tea, right? And it's the exact same thing in the classroom. So I think that what happens is it creates this authenticity, this ability to be fully hot ass mess when I walk in the classroom some days and still have students perked up at attention, doing what's expected of them, because we have created such a foundation of community care in our classrooms. And so I think what really happens and what it creates is the capacity for young people to learn past what you thought they would have even been capable of. Sometimes I'm looking at the curriculum that is developed for my school and I'm like, oh, this is too baby for my babies. I gotta judge this up. We got to add some connections in here. We got to bring back the four things that we talked about before. Like, because I know that they're on a higher level than that. Not because the reading level says that, not because the STAR test says that, not because the exam at the end of the year says that, but because I know that. And because they feel that when they're in my classroom in a way that they don't feel in other spaces. And so I think that that's what it is. It really is the ability to see them as fully human, give them permission to be fully human, and allow them to be joyful and be fun and be like, I will never, ever forget this. I was leading a book club on Ratchetemic, one of my favorite books about education ever. Shout out to Dr. Emdim. And one of the women that was in the book club said that the exuberance of children is infuriating. And I have it written up here somewhere back, because I come back to that all the time. And what I remember saying to her and because because sometimes you hear a kid laugh in class and you're like, you had a bad day. Shut up. What you laughing at? Ain't nothing funny. Right. And you recognize in that moment that has absolutely nothing to do with that child and everything to do with the fact that I have no joy in my life right now, that I can't find it in me. And so that being able to create that give and that take and the ability to, again, become more who we already naturally are before the system told us what we were supposed to be.
Bars. This is why I drop one of those Don DeMarcos, right? Yeah, even happy belated birthday to you as well, sis. You know what you said about you having to do the work, right? That made me think, like, 2 weeks ago, I turned 40. And I remember when I was like 12 or 20, I thought 40 was like, they got it all figured out. And like, I've done so much work and I realized I have so much more work to do in all areas of my life, and all of that impacts how we show up in our professional spaces, right? And we just really can't blur the lines between the two, right? They all especially for us, right? Because we are part of the community. We're not coming into the community. We are immersed in it. We're from it. So yeah, thank you. And so I'm a pass it to Jamila, and she's gonna bring the audience into this because there's a few questions that we got in the chat.
Yeah, the chat's been blowing up. The Q&A segment has been blowing up, and this has been an amazing conversation. So I'm going to start with the first question, from Linda Lucas. In my early days during Jim Crow, our teachers knew us well, encouraged us, became our parents when we were in school, and showed us that they loved us in spite of their low pay and lack of benefits. And I'm just going to paraphrase, this is kind of long. So knowing that 85% of teachers right now in the United States are young, white, and female, how can we make sure that our children are not victimized by ignorance and apathy of those who are taking over our neighborhoods and our schools? They are all of our children. And so how do we, I think, Eva, you talked a little bit about that from the stance of being a revolutionary educator. But that question is for anybody, if you want to take that.
I mean, I jump in super quick, and I think the reality is you have to chase joy in your own life. You don't have the capacity to be revolutionary. You don't have the capacity to be supportive of other people if you are like hurting. And I think that for myself, it really took the time for me to get real about what I needed, what I didn't have, so that I was not replicating what was done to me, because that's what becomes natural. When you are out of alignment with your values, it's because we're doing the thing that comes natural because it's what was done to us. And so what I found is that, like, yeah, yelling became easy. My mom yelled at me all the time. My grandma yelled at me all the time. Punishment came easy. I got punished all the time. School said, if you don't do this, then this is the consequence. And so if you don't have an alternative, so first is get right with you, and then it's get the tools that are replacing the traditional education system, the way that it works, the traditional systems at large, and the way that it works with the compliance and control and punishment based culture.
Absolutely. And then the next question actually feeds off of that. Right. So making sure that you're in alignment. And what this next question is making me think about, Dr. Bettina Love talks about having your co-conspirators, right? Your people that are going to be in alignment with you in order to do this work. So this is kind of related to the next question from Melissa. Do you ever experience hesitation to talk about the real stuff in the classroom? How do you get over any hesitation of receiving backlash for talking about global conflict, all of the real examples of the isms that might come up in the world? So that is a very real thing. The fear that a lot of educators have for speaking up, for telling the truth, and creating space for students to learn the truth. That is a very real thing that's happening in this country right now. And so we have a lot of educators that are, scared to speak up and to speak out. And how do we want to handle that?
I want to take a stab at it first because I definitely want to hear Eva's response. I don't know about you, Kristen, but I'm not a traditionally trained teacher. You know what I mean? I wrote a curriculum, but I didn't go to a teacher's prep program. The route was definitely unorthodox. And what I've been telling a lot of people in reference to that question, and kind of going back to that initial question, why would you expect the oppressor to do anything but oppress? Why are we relying on the system to teach our babies their history and their culture? I get upset when people say, "Oh, they're not teaching Black history in the schools." I'm like, do you really want them teaching it? Like you said, 85% white women, no disrespect, but they don't, that's not their culture. That's not their lived experience. So I always put it back on us, the village, the tribe. What are you doing in community rec centers? What are you doing at home? And not just to put it at home, but we have so many opportunities to give the kids the things that we say they're missing, to have these real conversations. Like I said, not a traditional educator. I'm not teaching, 9 to 5, but from 5 to 9, I am. And that's when I give them what they need.
And from the traditional educator on the panel, you have to like build the muscle. And it goes back to the culture. They mad. I got fired over this. And in the meeting, I said to my principal, am I really a revolutionary if I ain't got fired from a place like this? You have to build the muscle to enjoy making them mad. You have to build the muscle to enjoy frustrating people, because all that frustration is holding up a mirror to who they aren't and what they can't do. And there's nobody in my building that do it like I do it. Nobody. Not touching me, not today, not tomorrow, not next week. And why? Because I'm not scared to talk about Palestine. I'm not scared to talk about ICE. I'm not scared even when my kids come into my classroom and say my mom and my dad like ICE. That's fine. And they're murdering people. So, like, and if they want to come have a conversation with it, we're going to have the same conversation with the mama and the daddy. Because if we are willing to do revolutionary work, then we have to be willing to do revolutionary work. And revolutionary work is not comfortable. And so, like, that's where I live. Is that I had to, because I was the good student, the quiet, the do what my teacher says, and I had to let her die so that I could be this. I had to be comfortable doing exactly the opposite of what the system wanted me to do.
Absolutely. And the last question, I'm sorry, it might be more than almost one. This is from Andrew. Big up, Andrew. I work with students that are neurodivergent. Have you worked with a population like this, and how do you approach utilizing social emotional learning with neurodivergent learners?
I want to just piggyback off really quickly, that I think it's very important to, like the FUBU says, for us, by us, to build, for us, but also to raise money for us. And so I am very big. Anybody that knows me very well knows I'm very 10 toes down with funders. Just an example, at the beginning of 2025, I had some really tough conversations, and they was like, "Yeah, you change your language," and I'm like, "No." Period. Like, it's not happening. And so I wasn't changing nothing. I wasn't being strategic about, oh, no, this is what it is, because we are a theory and practice organization. We push out research and we see it in real time. There's no changing this because it's a need, right? And so I think it's really important for us right now more than ever to stand 10 toes down on what we believe in. Because, and I'll tell you, in the end of 2025, one of my funders came to me and said, "We're just going to fund you to tell us what philanthropy needs to know right now." And it was because of the fact that I stood 10 toes down in 2025, at the beginning of 2025, when everybody else was kind of shaking in their boots a little bit. And I was like, nah, we're not about to do this. So all that to say, I think we need to build, and we need to find the funding on our own. That's why we build in the communities, and where our Black educators can come to the communities, they can come and be refilled and be restored in the work we're doing. And then the other thing was with the neurodivergent. I have a lot of children that are neurodivergent in our programs. And one of the things we do in our first Summer Institute pre-survey, when folks apply, we have, what are their learning modalities? So we are literally looking at every single child that comes in our program around what are their learning, so that we can literally, like, we switch activities based on what we see, so that we're able to teach our kids better. We're able to allow our kids to be kinesthetic movers. We're able to allow our kids to have a different audio. One of our curriculums, we literally had kids watching the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl, and then they were able to break the whole Super Bowl down, because we saw that a lot of our children was visual learners and audio learners. So all that to say is, I think that's a big piece to being able to develop to the need of a child.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm just checking to see, make sure I didn't miss any questions. All right. All right. Well, tonight, man, the chat was on fire. All of you all were dropping bars. I want to hand the mic back over to Kareem to close us out.
Yeah, thank you, Jamil. I want to shout out all of the participants. All of the work that you all are doing is revolutionary. And the thing that's exciting me the most about this conversation is that this is the first time you all have formally met or shared a space together. So those are new connections that strengthen the movement that we're on to eradicate systems of oppression, eradicate racist systems, right? So that's what I'm excited for. Like, this community is getting stronger, and we are just going to keep on building from this conversation. And I'm just so excited to see where we take the work and the collaboration from this moment. We want to give a shout out to the whole chat. See, a couple people who's always showing us love, and we showing them love back. So Andrew Wang, we got Teach for the Culture in the building, Shauna Brown. If anybody else, if I missed you, I apologize, but I just want to big everybody up in the chat, and Manny Faces, yes, the legend, in the building. So yeah, and check out David was recently on Manny Faces. We're gonna share this in the follow-up. Was recently on Manny's podcast. So
Hip
be on
hop
the
can
lookout
save
for that.
America.
Yes, hip hop can and will save America. So yeah, I'm excited for how we gonna just continue to build and stay connected with each other.
Yeah, and please, if you want to learn more about any of our guests tonight, again, to Kareem's point, we're going to be sending out the recap of this video. We're also going to be sending out some resources. Kristen, someone was asking about the framework for K to 2. So K to 2 students. So we'll make sure that, because your framework is K to 12.
Yeah, it's K to 12, but we are developing more resources for that prevention lens too. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we will make sure you all get all the information that you need. And as always, please tap in with We Do It for the Culture. And we have a lot of great things coming up. We're doing some activations in some cities, so stay tuned for that. Working with some really dope artists. For those of you that are not familiar with Lareezy out in New Orleans, get familiar. For those of you that aren't familiar with Ruben Vincent, in North Carolina, get familiar. These are some really great artists with some really positive messages that our babies need to be tapped into. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all for everything that you do for the culture.
Bless. Thank y'all.